Hey everybody, my name is Mark, and today I'd like to talk to you about my Stedemon Black Mirror. Alright, so this video is about the Stedemon Black Mirror. This is basically the way it was explained to me in the listing that I responded to on Blade Binge, is that Stedemon was the original designer of the Black Mirror. And he developed this knife, and then basically he let Maxace also sell them. And he kind of continued to make these kind of alongside Maxace and sold them under his own name, Stedemon. So this video is going to be kind of it's going to be twofold. It's going to be talking about the knife, but also the circumstances under which that I bought the knife. Right? The circumstances are pretty strange. So I'm on Blade Binge quite a bit. I've got not nearly as many as other people, but I've got about 70 transactions on Blade Binge. And my reviews are, 5 stars. I'm usually, always known as someone that keeps their word and someone that's, has pretty good follow through. And my shipping is always fast and everything is always well packed. And I give people good deals and my prices are fair. So, I'm developing a pretty good reputation for not only just purchases, but trades. People trust that the knives that they're going to receive from me are going to be kind of exactly as described, and they're going to be a fair price, and they're going to get there, and they're going to be happy with them. And so far, no one has not been happy with anything that I've ever transacted on Blade Binge. So I wasn't super familiar with the Black Mirror. I saw a video on one. It was probably a couple of months ago. And I thought that was actually like a really nice looking knife, and it kind of caught my eye. To be honest, I watched the review and I kind of looked him up at the time or whatever. And then I just kind of forgot about it after that and moved on to, other things. I transact a lot of knives, not only on Blade Binge, but just all over the place. And so I'm always buying knives and trading and selling and, everything else. I handle a lot of knives. And so I've started filming them, which you can see, through my channel and everything. I've got quite a few videos built up, not only shorts, but, real full-length, long-form videos. And so I was on Blade Binge the other night, and there was this knife listed. And so, I remembered that I had seen that knife before and watched that video and really kind of liked it and wanted to try it out. So I had, at the time, several listings of my knives. I think there was probably 6 or 7. And, they ranged all the way from $1,000 knives all the way down to $100 knives. I think I sold 2 knives for $100. And so this knife was listed at, I think it was $265. And so the way it was listed, it said that it was a Stedemon knife and that, it explained basically who Stedemon was and, how it kind of came to be or whatever. And it had several pictures. It did not look like this. And I'm going to roll in a picture of, kind of what the knife did look like. So I knew there were certain aspects of the knife that, I wasn't thrilled about. This knife, when I saw the listing, it had a lightning anno pocket clip, and the titanium was unfortunately had been anodized But it was anodized in a way where it's one of those that you can't really touch at all. And, he even said in the listing that, this is, a blue anodize, and, the color really pops when you hit it with Windex or whatever, which is true of, some anodization, results. Basically, what happens is if you don't take your time and clean the substrate, the titanium or whatever it is that you're anodizing, if you don't clean it super well, then, the oxidation, it basically, it doesn't really stick. And it's got impurities underneath it. And just touching it, and you don't have to have, people say oils from your skin and that's what you have to wipe off or whatever. It's a lot more minute than that. And it picks up impurities that are left, unless you really clean it. You have to clean it like you wouldn't believe. And I anodize all the time. I do all kinds of modifications to knives. But, the key difference is when I'm done with mine, you can actually handle them and you don't have to walk around with a bottle of Windex in your pocket, and a rag. And every 5 minutes, you've got to wipe your knife off. I've had knives like that I've bought. There was a few Koenigs that I bought, mini goblins. And the first one I got was just plain titanium. And I liked that knife so much that I immediately bought two more. One was bronze and one was blue. And both of those had that same problem. It's not every anodized knife that you get will have that problem, but some do. And as far as I can tell, it has to do with how it was anodized and how it was handled while you were anodizing. And even something like, not etching it with, an etching acid. If you don't clean it really well and then etch it a little bit, even letting it dry out before you put it in the bath to anodize it, you should never do that. You should keep it wet the whole time. There's ways to do this. You can go on Chat GPT and you can ask, why does my titanium knife that's anodized show fingerprints so much or whatever? And it'll tell you, the whole reason why and what you should do to minimize that and, things that you can do. So basically what happened was I went ahead and got this, knowing that there were probably some things that I was going to change. But I like the aspect that, in the listing, he said it comes with a certificate of authenticity. And he didn't show a picture of it or anything, but, he said there was one. And I'm kind of a trusting person. I know that I would never, mislead someone or anything like that. So I went ahead and made the trade. I lowered the price of my trade, which was a Wee Makani, and it was a special edition. I had actually modified mine. So the backspacer and the pocket clip, when I had bought that, had kind of, a different ano. It wasn't lightning ano, which, I really stay away from, and I don't like the way it looks 95% of the time. But it had a different ano on it. And it was nice and bright and everything else, but to me, it just didn't match the knife. And so I put like a gold ano because the other hardware on the Makani and the logo, the Wii logo in the pivot was all gold and the hardware was gold, the body screws and stuff. And so I changed the pocket clip and the backspacer to match those. And to me, it kind of tied it all together and it made sense and it looked really good. And it was done well, I think. So I lowered my price. The reason I did that is just to basically, kind of change out my inventory every once in a while and get different knives that I can review and just try out. I just like trying out knives, and I I don't keep anything for long. And I'm that way just in the rest of my life, everything, cars. I don't keep cars usually for more than like 2 years. And I buy them, I get them usually new and I'll, keep them for a couple of years. and then I, get rid of them. I do that with, household things. I don't like keeping things around too long or clutter or anything like that. And so I'm constantly kind of refreshing and changing things out. And I do the same with knives. And I do that because now, I have this, and it seems ridiculous to say, but, I have a YouTube channel as meager as it is. And, I hardly have any, subscribers. I'm thankful for everybody that gets anything out of this and people that, subscribe to my channel. It's surprising, every day if something, the viewership changes or anything like that. It's always a big surprise. And I appreciate it. I really do. But that wasn't, the original plan. It was just for me to have something to do. So anyway, I'm constantly changing things out. So that was my goal in obtaining this knife and making the deal. And like I say, usually my deals, I price everything very well and I'm very fair and I'm super honest. And so I reveal everything. So my listing had said that, this knife has been modified, and I explained exactly what I had done, and I took, pictures of everything. This listing for this knife did not say that. This listing said this is a Stedemon black mirror, and it's what the Max Ace black mirror is based on. And it comes with a certificate of authenticity and, factory case or whatever, and that was basically it. So I went ahead and made the trade. The trade was pretty late at night. It was almost midnight. It was like 11:30 or 11:45 when we finally, made the trade and got everything paid for. During that time, we were kind of, chatting back and forth, and I let him know that I had a knife review, channel, and he said, "Oh yeah, so do I." And so I, gave him the address for my YouTube channel, and I guess he had checked it out while we were kind of chatting, and came back and he said, "Oorah," And so that's, my rallying cry. And so I was like, were you in the Marines? I said, I was, with the Marine wing back in the 80s. And he told me that his mom had served and that he had, been around Marines his entire life. And so I thought that was really cool. When I was in and even after, I've known, many, many women. I had a couple of women in my unit, and they're always like, excellent Marines. They work hard, they try harder because all eyes are on them, and everyone's kind of waiting for them to fail in some way or whatever. So, women generally, I think, even just in civilian workforce, but certainly in the service. When I was in, and the Marine Corps has changed a lot since I was in. I'm, a Reagan era Marine. Things were a lot different. But by and large, I think women in the service do a fantastic job, and they try harder, and they have to try harder. So it was encouraging to hear that his mom had served. And so we made the deal. And, usually what I say is I will, the following business day, and I usually tell them around midday, I said, I'm going to, at lunch or whatever, I'm going to run to the post office and I'm going to get your knife in the mail to you, and I'll send you a picture of the, the shipping receipt or whatever. So he said he was going to do the same thing. And basically what happened the next day was I had the worst day that I've had in quite a while. It was unbelievable. I didn't even take a lunch that day. I worked, a little late. And, he texted, right at like 4 o'clock or 4:30 or whatever, and asked me if I had shipped the knife yet. He said, I don't have a notification. Have you shipped the knife or whatever? And I said, man, it's been a terrible day. I haven't taken a lunch. I said, I'm going to run after work and try and get to the post office. So I did just that. And I was 10 minutes late getting to the post office. So sitting out in front of the post office in my car, I texted this guy and I was like, listen, man, I'm really sorry. I tried to get here and I missed him by 10 minutes. And so, I know this sucks, but I promise you, tomorrow at lunch, I'm going to do whatever it takes and I'm going to get here and, whatever. So he was a little miffed. He actually texted back. And I don't know if you've seen, and I guess I was with, one of my girlfriends or whatever that have young girl, like children. And so I've seen some of those Mean Girl movies, just being in the room. But he actually spelled out, okay, like he spelled with an ellipsis and then, okay. So I could tell he was kind of pissed or whatever. But I had taken the time to apologize a couple of times and told him exactly what had happened. So, that kind of, it kind of pissed me off, that he wouldn't even try and be a little more understanding. It had only been at that time, far less than 24 hours. We made the deal at midnight and he was calling it 4 p.m. So, it was a little weird. I think even his homepage or whatever, basically on Blade Binge, says that, his stuff will ship within 48 hours. And he says, it usually is 24 hours. Mine probably says the same thing, and mine is usually the same way. But it's not that I'd exceeded, any timetable. It's just technically, and I kind of felt bad about this, technically I wasn't able to keep my word. There were extenuating circumstances. And, I tried to explain them, but his reaction just kind of pissed me off. So, I just kind of told him, I was like, man, if you don't understand what happened and you won't be patient a little bit, I'll tell you what I'll do. I said, I will, your package is still in my car because I just took it for a trip across town, for no reason. I said, I will split the tape on that package and I'll put $60 in there. Just for all the hardship that you've incurred by not having your expensive knife shipped to you, basically when I said that I was going to do it. So I did that. So the next day I went to the bank. I haven't seen cash in years. So I had to go to an ATM and get cash out. Slit the tape on the box. I took a picture of the cash inside the box. I sealed it back up. And then I sent him a picture of the, tracking. And that happened at, I think it was like 12:30 or something. So I took like an early lunch and I was just told everybody, I got to get out of here. I got something to do. So basically it ended up being, I think it was 37 hours after we made the deal. I feel pretty good about that, but technically, I had dealings with someone and I wasn't able to follow through with what I said that I was going to do. And so, I felt bad about that. He could have taken it a different way. He could have been a little more understanding. I certainly would have been. But, I threw a little cash in there, whatever. That was before I got this knife. And so once I got the knife, I opened it up and it looked kind of the way that I thought it would. Some of the photos that he took make it look a lot better, but the anno job, you absolutely could not touch it. The second that you did, it turned dark just within 20 seconds of taking it out of the package, which he didn't, have it real shined up or anything anyway. I did. And then let it dry and everything else. But, just handling it, just a little bit. If I took it and just turned it over in my hand a couple of times, there were these big dark spots and it just looked like trash, basically. The anno job on the pocket clip, and still I'm thinking that all of this was factory, done by Stedemon, and that, this was unmodified and a brand new, because he said it was a brand new knife, never cut, never carried, whatever. So, and it came with a COA. And so I thought, okay, this is just what Stedemon was putting out back then, and it kind of sucks. And I'm going to try and work on it and get it to where, I can kind of, at least carry it. So then I'm going through the package and I see the what he's calling the certificate of authenticity. So my Wii knife actually has one, right? Because it is certified. It's a limited, production number. I think it was 81 out of 210, and it's got a big card from Wii, and it says, this is your certificate of authenticity, and it's got all this information on it. So the guy that sold me this knife, his idea of a certificate of authenticity is kind of a cheap, glossy, double-sided business card with his logo on it, and it says, "This is to authorize that the modifications on this knife were done by me." And so basically he misrepresented the entire knife to me, in that listing. There is no certificate of authenticity. It was indeed modified, which he did not divulge in the listing. And his little certificate is nothing more than just a marketing ploy for substandard work. So he is the one that did the ano job on the titanium scales. He is the one that did the lightning ano on the pocket clip, which, lightning ano turns out muddy and kind of, terrible at the best of times, in my opinion. The photo that you saw that I kind of tried to roll in there, you can see you had to hold it in just exactly the right light to get the ano to like really look decent. But most of the time, if you were just looking at it straight on or whatever, or in, different angles, it just looked like trash, There was a really large scratch that went from this area. It was real fine, but when I was looking at the ano, you could see it. And it ran from here all the way down the center to right about here. It was like 3/4 of the way down. Just a real fine scratch in supposedly a brand new knife. I have no idea if this is actually like a Stedemon. The box does say Stedemon on it, but there is no other paperwork or anything from a factory or a manufacturer that says anything like that at all. And MaxAce, their pocket clips are actually branded MaxAce. So because this one was done, he didn't prepare the surface of the titanium very well, and that's why it was so ashy and kind of fingerprinty. I don't know what he did. I don't get into lightning ano. I certainly have never tried it. And so I don't know what that process is. It could have, been that he sanded that off or did whatever, But anyway, the whole experience was kind of crazy. And, his reaction and kind of, okay, that was just a little more than I could take. And I guess the old Marine kind of rose up in me, and I was like, "Listen, man, I don't know. I didn't cuss him out or anything like that, and I wouldn't. It's like a public forum, and I wouldn't do that. And I'm not that kind of person anyway. I'm like seriously, trying to be a decent person. But I feel like basically what has happened is, and the $60 was on me, And I don't really care. Like, I'm doing fine. I'm not rich, but, that doesn't hurt me. Apparently, his raising the price, because this is a $150 knife, right? They're on sale. Even if this was an original Stedemon, it didn't look like, it did when he got done with it and when he sent it to me. All those were modifications that he did. And I guess he raised the price, thinking that his modifications were so good that it put, like $120 on top of, whatever, just for him to screw up the ano on the scales and put like a really ugly lightning job on the pocket clip. So my knife is about $325. And, plus the 60, so he did okay. I got like a $150 knife that he turned into basically just an ugly abortion that you couldn't really handle. And for that, he got an actually brand new certified knife, that was worth quite a bit more. So, My lesson to everyone out there is be really careful who you deal with. I should have known he had like 3 transactions on Blade Binge. I did check out his little, I guess he's got a YouTube, but it's mostly Instagram. He does have a YouTube, and they're shorts, they're real quick. And he's got a bunch of knives that he's run through there. I don't know where he gets them or if they're all his. I kind of doubt it. He's got quite a few. So I don't know. But that's him, That's just the kind of person he is. He was comfortable. He knows what he did. He knows exactly what he did. And I'll tell you the most ironic part of the whole thing is I was thinking when I got this knife and I opened it up and then I was going through the box and I saw his little card in there that he's calling a certificate of authenticity. And I laughed out loud. I was just laughing, looking at this little card, thinking, yeah, this is what this guy is passing off as a COA. And the whole time in the back of my mind, the only thing I was really wishing is that I'd been dealing with his mother, because she was a Marine and she wouldn't do that to somebody else, She probably, if she's still alive, she's my age, so she's probably still alive. I'm 60 and she was in a little after me, so, hopefully she's still alive. But all I kept thinking was she was a Marine, she probably has integrity and she wouldn't mislead someone like that, like her son, I guess, did. And so I was kind of wishing that I just, was able to deal with her instead of, her son, who basically, does this kind of crap. So anyway, that part's over. And that is my lesson too, I can't be so trusting. And if I have any questions, like I should have asked for photos of, that COA to see what it looked like because he didn't include it. And most people would, anyone out there selling a knife, if there's paperwork that's attached to the knife and it comes in the package, there's a picture of it. So for him to say there is one and didn't take a picture of it or include it at all and not really, talk about it much, that was a sure sign. Like I should have known something was up and I should have just bailed on the deal. But it doesn't matter, I'm way up on my trades most of the time. I've gone into knives for, really low and come out, $300 on top and stuff. And it was, fair. It was a fair price I sold it for. It's not like I ripped somebody off. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time and get a knife that was worth a lot of money for, not a lot of money. So anyway, that is that guy. That's just the way that individual is. And he's probably been that way his entire life. And so I don't care. I'm not going to waste any more breath on him. If being raised by a Marine wasn't enough to, keep him from doing things like that and misleading people, then nothing will, So that's on him. And I told him, I think, spend that money wisely. That's $60, I think I said something like go and buy a new cathode and maybe some sandpaper, to try and, if you're going to sell this stuff, you should learn, kind of what you're doing. So anyway, this is my knife now and it looks totally different. So I have changed this knife. And it's kind of funny because inside, one thing he did say is that it comes with extra hardware. And so there was, extra hardware, and it was new in this bag. And I'm really grateful that it was in there because some of the stuff is kind of ruined. So when he put this back together, after he did his, super special lightning anno, he put it back together wet. And so this is the pocket clip screw. And I'm going to try and hold that up there. But you can see that it's completely rusted out, right? That was the screw that I took out of the pocket clip when I took the knife apart. Just, and I just got this today. And all the work that I've done on it, it didn't take that long. It was like an hour. But that is a screw that he left in the pocket clip, and it's because he put it together wet. This is the barrel that goes through the backspacer. And I'm going to try and see if I can, because it's rusty too, because it was put together, and you can see kind of the rust on there, but it was put together wet. And so it's just been sitting like that, and it just rusted. So that's kind of weird. The other things I found when I took it apart, the pivot, he had grease on the bearings, which is fine, but it was kind of heavily greased, and it was slowing the action down a little bit. The pivot that is still, like, this is the new pivot that was included in the package of goodies, along with this COA. This one's brand new and it's never been touched, but the one that was in the knife was actually like really sticky for some reason, and it was something that I couldn't really get off of there. And so I assume that's probably one of the things that was slowing the action down. So I actually took a really fine, like a 2500 grit sandpaper, and just kind of sanded the pivot around before I put it back together. And after I did my ano stuff, I actually dried it. And so I don't have to worry about, this other hardware rusting or doing whatever. I don't know if this is, I guess it's titanium. No. So the reason it rusted is because this isn't titanium hardware, which makes sense. So that's all just, stainless or whatever, and it's got a bead blast finish on it. So that explains a lot. That's why it rusted. So you can't put that stuff together wet. So what I did was, in the back of the pocket clip, because it is a hidden screw, for the pocket clip. And so before I put it in there, I made sure it was dry and kind of blew it all out. But I also took one of my little swabs, and I took some oil and I put down in the hole to kind of help protect it. And I did that because I saw what happened to his, But anyway, this still has, and it's kind of hard to see. You can see the blue that I left here in the lock bar relief cuts. And this gets kind of fingerprints, but you can actually, it's not fingerprints like those, the ano that he did on the scales. It's just fingerprints because I polished it. And then I put a gold ano on it. But I think the gold ano on the pocket clip with the blue here of these relief cuts on the lock bar looks really good. And then I kind of stripped off the ano that he had put, it was like a blueberry or, blurple or whatever people call it. It was kind of powdery and kind of, ugly. And so I took that off. This still has just a really faint blue, like color to it. And it's hard to pick up, but it does. But the biggest thing is you can actually touch it. And so you can touch it and it doesn't leave, if there's fingerprints, it's because it's shiny and you're just putting a fingerprint. But if there was, you can actually just wipe it with your finger and take it off. And so you can handle this knife, which is key, I think, for a knife that you're going to have in your hands. You should be able to hold it and not mark it all up just terribly. So it looks ugly, all the time, and you're just constantly wiping it off. So this one is actually a usable knife now, right? So I don't know. I really like it. I'm kind of glad. The circumstance that I bought it under is, a little sus, but, I kind of cleaned it up and I adjusted the detent a little bit and cleaned the pivot up, and I lubed it how I lube them. And I got to say, I'm actually happy. Now, I did leave his backspacer, right? So he's got that Lightning anode backspacer. But the reason I left that is because there's a lot of gold, at least on like this side of it. And so it kind of matches the gold that, I put on there. Doesn't look nearly as good as my stuff, but I mean, can't fault him. I mean, how could it? So it's got that, and I left that. This actually, if you hold it in just the right light, you can see that it does have a little blue and purple in there or whatever, and that's fine, that's cool. So I went ahead and just left that because I can live with this, but that lightning anno on the pocket clip, I knew that was, I knew that wasn't going to last. So that was the first thing I did. But anyway, it's got smooth action now. The detent's nice and crispy. This is a 3¼ inch blade. And I don't know if any of this stuff is to be believed because, the guy was such a kind of liar. But let me see if I can get this. There we go. So black mirror, and it actually is Bowler M390, or so it says. Like I say, I hope it is. It probably is, but I don't trust a thing that guy said. So, we're just hoping. But as far as the build of the knife, it seems decent. It did have fully caged bearings. They're plastic. I don't know if that's what was in there before. There's no telling because he was in this knife and did all kinds of stuff. So he could have, traded the bearings that were in here for something else, or he just found these rolling around on his carpet and just grabbed them and threw them in there. I have no idea what he did. But they're in there now and they're clean, and the action is nice. And overall, I've got to say, the weight is a little less than 4 ounces. I do like the blade shape, even though it's like a super plain, just flat grind, all the way from the blade spine all the way down. There's like no detail at all. So it is like plain, just basic bitch. But, it's not bad. It's got a little blade window there, and, you can get your flick on, and it's a good thing because it's single deployment knife. But, I'm actually, I hate the circumstance, right? But I'm kind of glad that I have this knife. I will say the lock bar area is like really comfortable. There's a lot of relief there, on the show side, and so you can really get in there easily. And the lock bar side scale is so thick, or the lock bar is so thick that, and it's kind of relieved. There is a couple of lines there that you can see right down here that they put in there, but you can't even really feel them that much, And so it's not really doing a lot, but it doesn't matter because there's so much room there. You just put your thumb there and put a little pressure, and it's just gonna, release that blade, and it's really comfortable to use. The blade center was a little off when I got it, but now it's all tuned up and it's good to go, and I like the action, and, it was super expensive. This is a $150 knife that I actually ended up paying about $400 for. So I got took, and, that is my lesson to everybody. Be careful who you deal with and make them prove themselves if there's even a doubt. Don't trust. Don't trust anybody, kids. You really got to be careful who you deal with, because this was an unscrupulous seller. And, I kind of let some of it happen because I was just looking for new stock to kind of, run through my channel and film. But, I got took, and that's just kind of the way it is. I'm an adult and I'm going to deal with it. And, that's just it. So anyway, this is my Stedemon black mirror, and I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks very much.